First story. During my last semester of high school in the fall of 2015, a sequence of events transpired that would ultimately leave me with a terrifying memory. At first, it appeared like a harmless choice for the girls' varsity basketball team, who were making their first playoff appearance, to miss the pep rally. I had no idea that decision, which seemed insignificant at the time, would put me in danger. Theater Tech was the last course I took that day. It was a fine arts credit that I took sporadically. I went on this adventure with two friends who were in a lower grade. Instead of attending the pep rally, we made the decision to leave school early and go to the Taco Bell nearby as we do every day. We were, however, compelled to detour across the school nature trail due to the presence of watchful administrators and security personnel monitoring the parking lots in an attempt to apprehend students. We came into a strange, unkempt figure along this trail, a thin white child with black hair that was disordered and was dressed in loose-fitting pants and a white t-shirt. It appeared as though he had been scuttling through the foliage. I felt concerned as we got closer because of his overall messy appearance. My pals introduced themselves and said they kind of knew him from grade school. I could tell the child was nervous when we told him why we were in the woods and not at the pep rally. He admitted to being dropped off at school that morning with the intention of taking a bus to the alternate school for kids on suspension. But instead of wearing the alternate school uniform, he had made the decision to spend the entire school day hiding in the path. The atmosphere tightened as he looked about expectantly, as if he was expecting danger. We wished him success and declared our plan to get into our cars and leave before the pep rally concluded, feeling a hint of unease beneath the surface. He became more amiable as we walked towards the parking lot. Once we brought up the topic of vehicles, he eventually requested if we might take him home by car. We hesitated, half-baking an excuse unprepared for such a request, but he insisted, saying that since he had broken into a car at a nearby megachurch, people would soon be looking for him. When he pulled out a pistol hidden in his belt, the whole scene changed. As the situation's reality set in, fear overcame me. The child, desperate and unaccustomed, asked that we keep his secret. It was an awkward stalemate, growing more tense with every second that went by. I summoned up the resolve to tell him no, that we had to leave, when he requested again, more like a mandate, for a ride home. Then, in an odd turn of events, he asked if we wanted to see something before heading off. We all started to feel uneasy, but my first friend, who is typically more outspoken, stepped in and said we didn't want to see anything. We hurried by him, feeling the hurry, and as we got further away, we started to run toward the parking lot. He stood there, staring back at us as we ran. Though there was still a lingering sense of danger, we made it to the parking lot without being noticed by the police who had descended on the area. We pieced together the disturbing jigsaw while hiding in a classroom. The child had texted his girlfriend about a sinister scheme, skipped the alternate school, and taken firearms from a car outside the church. Luckily, she called the police, which resulted in the lockdown and the eventual capture of the armed burglar. The experience permanently altered my mental state and served as a sobering reminder of the unpredictable nature of even seemingly routine events. At the age of 16, I was facing the difficulties of high school when this terrifying event occurred. Second story. Before the inner peace suddenly burst into life and startled everyone in the cafeteria, it appeared to be just another typical day. The principal broke the silence, declaring that this was a lockdown, not a drill. As the reality of the situation set in, the regular conversation was replaced by an unnerving silence. Our school had never experienced a lockdown, so a gnawing sense of hopelessness gnawed at me. After gathering my thoughts, I followed the crowd of students being led to the locker rooms and gymnasium where I hid. I checked my phone, hoping for news, but all I got was a spotty signal with no updates. A huge bang echoed across the hallway, and then horrified screams could be heard. I was overcome with panic as I realized the danger was closer than I had thought. The sound of heavy footfall reverberated through the hallway, making my students and I scramble to keep our distance from each other. Tension was palpable as the seconds passed slowly. Having to squeeze through the gymnasium doors, I had to make a snap decision. Feeling the pressure, I hurried out via an open door, and the gym teacher stood strangely, not trying to stop me, desperate to get in. Touch with my mother, I raced to the back of the school through the soccer field and took cover in the trees. I was startled to hear a well-known voice behind me. Though they had not been close friends, Tanner had been a classmate all those years. With a firearm in his hand, his frightening glare was fixed on me. My throat tightened with fear as I begged for assistance, but he stood there unfazed, M4, rifle in hand and handgun holstered. "Hey man, please don't do this," I pleaded, my heart racing with adrenaline. It was obvious that danger was imminent. Tanner's eyes surprisingly flickered to hesitation. I tried talking sense into his head and asked him to think things through. He miraculously brought his weapon down. To my surprise, after a tense 5 minutes of pleading, Tanner broke down, tears running down his cheeks. He left me in a condition of constant astonishment and a surreal sequence of events. I decided to leave the school grounds completely, running towards the playground in the distance after realizing I couldn't wait around for a terrible fate. I hid behind a fence near the swings in search of a safer place to be, where I could regain my breath. As I heard footsteps getting closer and peered out, I was relieved to see my best friend Robert. He had followed me after seeing me interact with Tanner. That was when I found out Tanner had voluntarily given himself up to be jailed that day, instead of carrying out his evil scheme. As the day came to a conclusion, I ran home and told my mother about the terrifying event. We hugged and shed many tears. I couldn't get rid of the feeling that Tanner, who had been bullied all of his life, had been on the verge of doing irreparable damage. It served as a sobering reminder that something needed to change in our world. Telltale 3. That night, when I told my mother about the horrific experiences, we had to face the hard truth that Tanner, who had been bullied relentlessly, had finally had enough. Even though his behavior was unacceptable, it was a clear reminder of the pervasive problems in our society. I was left with a persistent feeling of vulnerability in the aftermath. I was deeply affected by the occurrence, which made me think about how important empathy and understanding are. It was an appeal to address the underlying reasons of such hopelessness and desperation, and to promote an environment where everyone is respected and feels heard. Tanner's experience sparked debate over the condition of mental health and the necessity of setting up support networks for people who are at risk. It served as a wake-up call for our community to unite behind the value of kindness and compassion in an effort to stop other people's lives from going through such sad chapters. Over the course of the next several days, the incident served as a spark for change at our school. A renewed sense of camaraderie surfaced as discussions about mental health and anti-bullying campaigns took front stage. Even while Tanner's cries for assistance were frightening, they served as a trigger for addressing the underlying problems that are frequently ignored. Ultimately, the experience made me face the frailty of life and the necessity of real human connection. It was the tale of a community banding together to heal and draw lessons from the darkness that had briefly engulfed us, in addition to one of survival. The wounds persisted, but so did the resolve to create a more secure and caring atmosphere for everybody. Even after 9 years have passed, the details of that day are still vividly vivid in my memory. The memory is so vivid it nearly seems unreal, maybe because I've told the story so many times. Unlike others of my peers who witnessed even more terrifying scenes, the events of that day marked a turning point for me, one where luck seemed to be on my side. I don't have any long-lasting emotional scars from the shooting incident that happened during my freshman year of high school, a recollection that has blurred the borders of time in some way. For some of my friends and acquaintances from that time, though, that isn't the case. For many, the trauma paved the way for a more difficult journey marked by serious emotional issues, melancholy, and in one terrible instance, a decline into drug addiction. Allow me to go back and tell you the start of this terrifying story. It was a dreary springtime day in Oregon during one of the final weeks of freshman year. It felt strangely warm even though the sun was having trouble breaking through the heavy clouds. During passing time, the oppressive heat drove both students and teachers into the courtyard. in search of relief from the stuffy classrooms without air conditioning. We had no idea that this ordinary Friday would quickly spiral into a terrifying nightmare. We played flag football in the stadium behind the school during my first period. When I had some spare time, I offered to help my students go to the locker rooms while I put the equipment back in the upstairs gym supply cupboard. It appears like fate guided me to make the vital decision to leave the supply closet open. The typical school day was interrupted as I was coming down the stairs by an unexpected burst of gunshots. Screams reverberated through the corridors, causing panic as my fellow students ran for their lives. I had to reconsider my ideas in light of the tumultuous scenario, which made me sprint back upstairs. As I made it to the closet and closed the door behind me, fear gripped me. 5 more shots rang out in the air. Without my cell phone, I was alone in the dark and couldn't tell how much time was passing. It felt like an eternity. All I could do was wait, hoping and praying that the atrocity that was taking place would not affect my sister, who was safe at home. I was terrified, and every second that went by made me more and more anxious about being safe or dead. The eerie silence was broken by footsteps, and I sensed another person's presence for the first time. One more gunshot was heard, and then 2 sets of footsteps ran up the stairs and into the gym. As the footsteps neared the door, I crouched in the closet and prepared for the worst. The doorknob shook fiercely, and I started crying out in terror into the night. Thank goodness the following few seconds were a blur as a SWAT team member came to my aid, hoisting me up and directing me quickly as we crossed the school courtyard. I caught a sight of the aftermath, the pathways marred by blood, a menacing reminder of the catastrophe that had occurred. I found out later that the gunman, a junior at the time, had a past filled with resentment and melancholy. After an incident in the courtyard turned violent, he shot a language arts teacher and another student before running under the gym bleachers. His rampage persisted, and the experience came to an end when he was shot and killed by a police in the upstairs gym. A community was left damaged by the aftermath, and although I experienced anxiety for a while, life has since guided me along a prosperous road. I learned from the experience how important it is to always be aware of your surroundings and to have an escape plan, and I've carried that lesson with me wherever life may take me. When I think back on those horrifying moments, I realize how that fatal day's aftermath changed me in unthinkable ways. I've succeeded in life, in spite of the uneasiness that persisted for long. Even if the scars are still visible, they are a reminder of one's strength of character and the value of savoring each moment. The devastating cascade that my friends and classmates experienced, many of whom saw more than I did, serves as a sobering reminder of how fleeting life is. The tragic realities that haunt me as I go through life are the accounts of people who battled mental demons following the massacre and fell into darkness. I've learned a lot from that day, including how important it is to remain watchful, cherish each moment, and develop a profound gratitude for our loved ones' safety. I've discovered that, even in the most ordinary of circumstances, I need always be aware of my surroundings and have a plan of escape because the world can be both beautiful and terrible. Even while the wounds from that day might never completely heal, they are a continual reminder of the human spirit's resiliency and the value of creating a community that stands by one another in the most trying circumstances. I take the memories of those who perished with me as I go on in an effort to honor their memory and create a world in which tragedies like these are not just unfathomable, but also teachable moments.